This is the Nintendo Switch. These are a bunch of Nintendo Switch games. This is the PlayStation 2. These are a bunch of PlayStation 2 games. Now, these two consoles might be from different eras, but the future of one can be seen in another. Now, you're probably wondering what the hell I could possibly be talking about. And that's a fair point. I'm talking about my theory on the future of the Nintendo Switch, which, as of now, is Nintendo's current console, with a sequel very close to coming out. Reaction to the Switch 2 has been mixed so far, mainly from its high price and lack of currently announced exclusives. Now, I'm going to get a little analytical with you. So, this is the 6th time that Nintendo will be releasing a sequel console. When I say sequel console, I mean a console that takes its name from its predecessor. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, 3DS, and Wii U are the last 5 consoles that were direct sequels to their previous ones. Now with all these sequel consoles, there's one common thing. Each one did not sell as well as its predecessor. Except for the Game Boy Advance, which outsold the Game Boy Color, but the Color did not sell as well as the original Game Boy. That's not to say that all these consoles were failures. No, basically all of these except for the Wii U were successes. It's just notable that when Nintendo releases a sequel console, it's usually not going to sell as well as the first one. Looking at the Switch, as of this video's release, it is the 3rd best-selling console of all time, with over 152 million consoles sold worldwide. It's beaten only by the Nintendo DS, and the topic I brought up earlier, the PlayStation 2. Over 160 million of these bad boys were sold worldwide. It's a console that sold amazing. There was hype for its sequel console, the PlayStation 3, but this hype was hurt considerably by a high price tag and a lack of initial exclusives. While the PlayStation 3 didn't exactly fail, it didn't match the sales of the console that came before it. Wait, a console that sold extremely well, and is getting a direct sequel console that has a controversial price tag and lack of launch titles. This all sounds very familiar. I believe that the future of the Nintendo Switch is going to directly parallel the PlayStation 2. For those who don't know about the life of the PlayStation 2 after the PlayStation 3 came out, let me explain. So new PS2 consoles were being made long after the PlayStation 3 was released, and new games for the console were coming out long after that. Notoriously, the last game released for the console was FIFA 14, which was released on September 24th, 2013. To put that into perspective, the PlayStation 4 would launch less than 2 months later, November of the same year. But FIFA 14 was one of 4 new games released that year, alongside older games that were still being produced around that time. Hell, Square Enix was notably still selling new copies of some of their PlayStation 2 games up until the 2020s. And it makes sense. This is the best-selling console of all time. And if people are still going to buy the games, why stop making them? So yeah, I mean, if you know anything about the PlayStation 2, you probably know about FIFA 14 coming out in 2013, and that being the last game. Though, I think what a lot of people miss about the later years of the PlayStation 2 is the fact that it was well supported long after the PlayStation 3 launched. And I'm talking outside of sport games like FIFA. Like, yeah, sport games are notorious for coming out on older consoles long after their successors are released, but major releases were still coming out long after the PlayStation 3's launch. For example, Sega was releasing a bunch of games on the PlayStation 2 after the 3 came out. Sonic Unleashed, Nights into Dreams, multiple game compilations, Superstars Tennis, Seaman 2. These are just some of the games Sega released in the years after the PlayStation 3's release. Other major franchises got releases on the PlayStation 2 after the 3 came out also. Spyro, Tomb Raider, Guitar Hero, Fatal Fury, Manhunt, Dance Dance Revolution, Silent Hill, even Final Fantasy. These were major video game franchises that were supporting the PlayStation 2 when its successor was already out. And that's not even mentioning licensed games, which, yeah, licensed games are notorious for having inconsistent quality and usually having poor quality, but they were still pumping life into the system. SpongeBob, Dora, G.I. Joe, Scooby-Doo, Ben 10, Toy Story, Despicable Me. These are just a few licensed properties that were keeping the PlayStation 2 going. Hell, Toy Story even got bundled with new PlayStation 2s. And now for the main kicker. So, going back to the Switch, Nintendo has already announced games that are going to be published by themselves for the console after the Switch 2 releases. Well, did you know that Sony did the same with the PlayStation 2? For example, Sony published God of War 2 in 2007, Twisted Metal Head On in 2008, Jak and Daxter The Last Frontier, Ghostbusters, Chandragupta, and Secret Agent Clank in 2009, Siphon Filter, Logan's Shadow in 2010, MLB The Show and Raw 1 in 2011, and Dawn 2 in 2013 as their final first-party game for the console. And this isn't even all the games Sony published for the PlayStation 2 after the PlayStation 3's launch. It's very rare for first-party games to come out that long after a console's release. I fully believe that the Nintendo Switch is going to follow in the footsteps of the PlayStation 2. It's going to see releases long after the Switch 2 releases, even ones from Nintendo. And Nintendo is going to keep pumping out new consoles until they stop selling. Hell, I predict the Switch will eventually beat the PlayStation 2 as the best-selling video game console of all time. And as crazy as this all sounds, it wouldn't be the first time a Nintendo console has gone down a path like this. The original NES and Famicom had a life like this. The Super Nintendo didn't sell as well as it did, and new NES consoles were sold until 1995 and 1996 in most regions, while in Japan the Famicom had new consoles sold until 2003, 20 years after its original release in 1983. And you know old games were still being produced for it until then. New games were being made for the system long after the SNES was released. Last Nintendo licensed game was The Lion King on May 25th, 1995, and Nintendo themselves published a bunch of games from 1990 to 1995 after the SNES came out. Wario's Woods was their last one, in 1995, and games were still being produced many years after that. So yes, I firmly believe that the future of the Switch can be seen by the pasts of the PlayStation 2 and NES. It will live on for years longer with new games still being released, some even by Nintendo themselves. And the console will continue to sell well. Meanwhile, the Switch 2 will fail to meet the sales numbers of the original Switch. I don't necessarily think it'll be a failure, but I doubt it'll match the Switch's powerful sales. Of course, this is all just me theorizing, with my only evidence being what's happened in the past. I'm sure many of you will disagree, and honestly, I want to hear what you think of the future of the original Switch will be. As of this video's release, the Switch will be coming out tomorrow, June 5th, 2025. Crazy to think it's been like, what, 8 years since the original Switch came out? If you're watching this a few years from the video's release, tell me how wrong I am. And maybe like and subscribe, please? Thank you for watching. I honestly love talking about the PlayStation 2. I got mine in 2007, after the PlayStation 3 came out, so I dealt with the later years of the system's life, and I didn't get a PlayStation 3 until 2021, after I already had a 4 and a 5. This video was actually a bit inspired by Crator Corner's video on the NES, which talks a lot about the final years of the console. I didn't know the console was supported as long as it was until watching that. Links to his video and the articles I used for this video will be in the description below. Until next time.